Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. So it's time for our regular look at the latest news from the world of culture and the arts. And here to join me once again, it's the broadcaster and author, David Oldroyd-Bolt. So, David, there's always a lot to talk about, but I think you want to start with a story about the Pope.
Yes, the Pope has put his foot in it again. He seems to have an unfortunate fondness for dictators. So after rather recently saying that Russians should be proud of their imperial heritage, proud of the heritage of Peter the Great and Catherine II, both of whom essentially colonised Ukraine, wiped out the language and committed mass murder, the Pope has now gone to China and said, and exhorted Chinese Catholics, who are a minority and a greatly suppressed one, to be good Chinese citizens.
Interesting. We might even have the tweet that he actually said this. I mean, there it is. You know, and he's effectively, as Damien Thompson there, who's quote-tweeted him there, sort of suggested he's supporting the CCP there. It does feel like an odd thing for the Pope to be doing. Should someone else be running his Twitter account, maybe? I
think perhaps someone else ought to be running the Vatican, but that's a different story.
But is this just not justifiable with, you know, render unto Caesar what are Caesar's, you know, is there...
I think it's rather different when you have, with the Chinese Communist Party, a regime that is currently engaged in genocide on religious and racial grounds against the Uyghur people, the Muslim inhabitants of northern China. He's got a rather odd history, I think, with the Chinese Pope Francis. For instance, in 2018, he gave the Chinese Communist Party the right to nominate Catholic bishops, which is an extremely odd thing to do with a dictatorial state.
Yes.
And he has, ever since the beginning of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, exhorted that there be a peaceful solution. But the only instance that the Pope has spoken out about a particular atrocity was when he spoke about the killing of Dugina, who is the daughter of Alexander Dugin, Putin's favourite philosopher, who said at one point that it is absolutely right to kill the Ukrainians. Right. When she was asked about this, she said, yes, she rather agreed. She was killed in a car bombing, which the Ukrainians have not accepted total responsibility for, but that is the only instance. None of the blanket bombings has the Pope spoken out about.
Well, that's the point, isn't it? Once you start making comments about these international affairs, the absences of your commentary are also noted.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, is it just the case that maybe he just doesn't really know much about it? Is it coming from a place of ignorance, I suppose I'm saying?
That would be a charitable reading, and I think perhaps we should be charitable, being Christian. But I think one of the big problems is that, as a Catholic, you're expected to follow the Pope as a moral lead.
Yes.
And given that the moral lead on both China and the Ukraine-Russia war, I should say, is perfectly pellucid and totally obvious to anybody with an even vaguely functioning moral compass, it is slightly disconcerting and difficult, therefore, for Catholics to pray each week for the Pope and his leadership when he seems to be giving such poor leadership on the overwhelming moral issues of the time, certainly when it comes to geopolitics.
Let's move on now to a different story. Simon Rattle, who I think is probably the only conductor who people generally know about in the mainstream, right? For some reason, he's become the go-to.
Yeah, indeed.
What's happened here?
So Sir Simon Rattle, we must give him his full due, who is an extraordinary conductor, a man who's brought both forgotten or rather neglected composers of the past to the fore and done a great deal to support new music in Britain and education, has been for the past 6 years the conductor of the London Symphony Orchestra, which is a very short time considering that he was for 18 years at the City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra and then for 16 years at the Berlin Philharmonic Orchestra, the youngest chief conductor in its history and the only Englishman so far, the only Briton. And what seems to have happened here is that Simon Rattle has fallen very deeply out with the musical establishment of this country. Some of it has to do with Brexit. He has pointed out, quite rightly, that the government, or the governments since 2016, have been horrendously slow to fix the visa problems faced by international touring musicians. Another big thing is that he thought, and I think most people who attend concerts there would agree, that the Barbican Concert Hall in London has an appalling acoustic. It's not fit for purpose.
And this is where the LSO is based.
This is where the LSO is based. It's a 1960s concrete monstrosity, which has had a lot of money spent on it over the years with various bits of baffling and extra additions inside the hall to make the acoustic better. It hasn't worked. So he suggested, look, the Museum of London is moving from London Wall by St Paul's Cathedral. There's a big space that's going to be empty. Let's fundraise, fundraise, fundraise. George Osborne, while Chancellor, seemed to be on board with this, and then it went away. And let's have a truly world-class concert hall. This didn't happen. He fell out with the Arts Council and its then head, Sir Nicholas Kenyon, and essentially he's slung his hook and gone back to Germany.
Is this the reason he's given for leaving the LSE?
It was one of the reasons he's given. He also, he decries Brexit, and he decries heavily the fact that the city of Berlin spends more on culture and cultural education than the whole of the UK.
Well, that's an interesting point, isn't it? Why is it that we in this country, I mean, is it just that we have a Conservative government that don't particularly value the arts? Is that why they don't spend enough?
No, I think it's because we in this country have tended to think that though there should be some straight provision for the arts, that the majority of it should come from corporate sponsorship or individual donation.
Yes.
Now, that's, I think, a model that works extremely well in America, where you have very, very generous tax breaks for both corporate and personal giving.
Yes.
But given that that model is not replicated here to nearly the same degree, I think we have to have a conversation about how we fund the arts. Now, I think for most of us, whether on the left or the right, having a fully funded arts sector with good educational possibilities so that people of all backgrounds can be involved in the arts is a mark of a civilised country.
Well, yeah, because people will think that Simon Rattle and the type of music that he produces is elitist, I suppose.
Well, but this is a working-class boy from Liverpool,
yeah,
whose father was in the Merchant Navy, who, through good city education systems and through being talented, managed to rise to the very top of his profession and has been an absolute idol for a great many people from around the world. So the fact that he is being made, or rather that he feels he has to leave his homeland once more, is, I think, rather sad. He has, it must be said, remained a resident of Germany while London Symphony Orchestra conductor, and he is married to a Czech and 3 children there, so perhaps there are other personal ties playing a part. But I think it is a sadness that he's only been there for a relatively short time, and as we saw with his concert last Sunday at the BBC Proms, when he gave a performance of Francis Poulenc's vocal piece that he gave some years ago at the Prom, and then Mahler's Night Symphony, which is one of his great calling cards. Every review was a 5-star review.
Yes,
Every review was staggered.
Yeah.
So I think it's a terrible shame for British music and for our concert life that we're losing him.
Interesting to hear that you're not a fan of the Barbican. Brutalism not your thing, David?
Not terribly, no. I think that those who have to live around it, well, those who live in it, it's fine. You get a wonderful view. Those who have to live around it and you have to look at it.
Yes.
It's a terrible
Well,
thing.
I used to work there, so I got quite accustomed to it, to be honest. Final story of tonight. So this is to do with a new campaign relating to Handel.
Yeah, well, it's relating to St George's Hanover Square in London, which is a beautiful 18th century church. And just before Christmas, a part of the portico roof, the front porch roof, fell in. And that actually, it covers the pavement on St George's Street.
Yep.
So anybody wanting to walk down there now has to go around a great deal of scaffolding. It's a church that Handel worshipped at a great deal, where many of his works were given performances. So any of your viewers and listeners who are able, on the 7th and 8th of September, that's this Thursday and Friday, can go along from 3 p.m, and there is an open performance of bits of Handel's Messiah that you can take part in. It's £5 each, and this will raise money, hopefully, for £500,000 is the total needed to repair the portico. This will raise money for this great building with a wonderful historical alliance, and also it is one of the great churches of London. So anybody who's able, just pop in for half an hour, sing along. The conductors and the players will change throughout the 24 hours, but I think it'll be a wonderful historical event and something that we can all do of altruism and good civic pride.
Absolutely, and that website address is on the screen right at the moment. This is in Hanover Square.
Yeah, Hanover Square in Mayfair, just around the corner from Oxford Circus, so you've got no excuse not to be able to get there.
Yep.
And I think you will find it an edifying and enjoyable experience.
David Oldroyd-Bolt, as usual, a great pleasure. Please come back very soon.
Thank you.